around the nation, the ATN Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. We got a great show for you guys today. Yes, we are going to talk about Bolivia. Got a couple of stories related to that. We also have, of course, Donald Trump and the craziness that is impeachment. And then we also have the Republican strategy. And how's that working out? Not very well. So we're going to break down the Republicans' newest defense, obviously on impeachment. And then, of course, we're going to get to a story that is very seasonally adjusted, right? I don't even know what that means. We're going to talk about Scott Walker and the holiday tree. Yes. That should be a lot of fun. So we got a great show for you guys today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important that you do so. That helps us get the message out. Like I said, I had I took a 4-day weekend, right, and I figured out one of the stressors is looking at the numbers. And I remember something that Kyle told me, and he said, never look at the numbers. You will drive yourself crazy. And guess what? I'm back to looking at the numbers. And the thing that disturbs me is the fact that it's not getting out. Like, my videos are not getting out to my actual audience. So it's like 3,000, 4,000 views. We got over 100,000 subscribers. So what's important is sharing. So that really, really helps. Share that stream, and also for the sake of our mental health, support us on Patreon. Why? Because that helps me not have to pay attention to the freaking numbers. As well as Q bounties. Yes, I do notice that, and I do, yes, have to answer some of those Q bounty questions and get back to doing that as well. No, I haven't stopped doing that. So I will get back to doing that. All right. So very important. It helps out greatly if you support the channel, in either way, right? All right. So I guess we might as well get started here with what the coup is actually about, and so that's really interesting. Yeah, right now the volume, I can't really mess with it, because if I turn it up too high, it ends up distorting and peaking, and so not going to be able to do that at this point. But I usually turn it up in post for the clips to avoid, like I said, that the distortion. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that sound setting, but we'll go to it. Maybe I'll just talk louder. Yes, maybe talking louder will help. No, it actually doesn't. Okay, anyway, let's get to the first story here. Like I said, the what is it? What the coup is actually all about. All right, so let's jump in. All right. Well, that kind of gives it away, doesn't it? All right. So over the weekend, Bolivian president, or I should say ex-president, Evo Morales, who, by the way, is the first indigenous president of the country and a leftist leader, resigned. So now he resigned after being pressured by the Bolivian military following some allegedly disputed elections. Okay, so, and I say resign, but in reality, if you're pushed out by the military, then it's considered a coup. So, now, let me give you the details on why that's kind of why that's basically a sham. On October 20th, Morales had won re-election by more than 600,000 votes. It's about 10% margin. And so he went up against his opposition, the opposition candidate, Carlos Mesa, right, in the first round of elections. Okay, so he won. He won the election. Immediately, the OAS, immediately corporate media says, oh, no, that sham election. So Morales said, okay, look, I see your concerns. So let's do another election. Not good enough. and of course, the military ended up forcing him out. So again, their whole argument is that there was irregularities in the election, right? However, according to experts who did statistical analysis of Bolivia's publicly available voting data, found no evidence of irregularities or fraud. No voter fraud, no election fraud. And and of course, there are those who did go into detail about the methods used to count the votes, and found that the results were actually incredibly accurate. And Morales had won the election. Now, there was one issue that was also brought up, and that's Morales and term limits, right? So now Morales was running for a fourth term, and earlier, I think it was 2016, he actually went up against the courts to abolish term limits, right? So saying that, look, I believe that these are unconstitutional. Now, the Bolivian version of the Supreme Court said those term limits were also unconstitutional. So, look, he won. He won the election. He should be president today. Now, we might not like it, but technically, he won fair and square. But okay, nonetheless, the military pushed him out. And by the way, these are right-wing paramilitary groups also helped push him out. According to Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone, you had these right-wing opposition gangs that actually went and physically attacked elected politicians from the leftist MAS party. They even ransacked the home of Morales himself while burning down houses of several other top socialist officials. So there is definite violence there. And not only that, but you also have a video floating around. I decided not to show that because it's too graphic. But there was a female socialist mayor that was publicly tortured on video. So that's disastrous. So now one of the major figures in the opposition was a man named Luis Fernando Camacho. Now, it's not the Camacho from Idiocracy, right? No, this is a guy who's incredibly dangerous. He is a Christian fundamentalist, multi-millionaire. So his family was involved in Bolivian gas. And so before Morales and the left-wing parties took over, they were very much the peak of Bolivian society. This one family, they had a lot of money, again, because they were connected to gas. Now, that family actually lost out on multiple millions of dollars after Morales nationalized the gas industry. So let's be honest about that, right? So this guy obviously had a chip on his shoulder, and so was actually working with and consulting with Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, and also Juan Guaido, who was opposition in Venezuela, right? That tried to do a coup there. All of them backed by the United States and the Trump administration specifically. But the United States, of course, even under Democratic presidents, has had a history of trying to overthrow leftist leaders in South America. Now, it turns out that the reason that the United States, or one of them, hate leftist leaders in South America is because of the kinds of reforms they do. They actually do crack down and try to eliminate poverty. But most importantly, at least in the eyes of the United States and the corporations that own our government, is that these one of the things that these countries actually do is they tend to nationalize their natural resources and make it so that these multinational corporations can actually go in and exploit those resources. Now, as far as reforms that Morales did, before Morales, they were run essentially by right-wing neoliberals, basically. And so what they did is they had a lot of privatization. They had a so-called free market, and it turns out there was a lot of people that were in poverty due to that system. Now, while in office, the Movement Towards Socialism Party, that's the MAS party, right, actually reduced poverty by about 42% and extreme poverty by about 60%. They also increased the GDP of the entire country. So now the United States and the CIA, the corporations, they look at that and they say, we no like you. I don't like that. No, 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 because we have this narrative that any kind of socialism, whether it be universal health care, like Medicare for all, doesn't work, leads to eating rats. Well, so we must continue that. And we must crush every single leftist leader in South America, especially if they have the audacity to cut off our multinational corporations from their natural resources. Can't have that. Can't have that at all. So now, Evo also being indigenous, very important to Bolivia as well. He was actually the first to represent the indigenous majority of the country. Before Evo Morales, uh, basically all the presidents of, I think, going back at least 120 years, were descendants of white Europeans and generally were, again, right wing, neoliberal, in favor of mass privatization, which appears to be what the new Bolivian government might end up doing. Just like what happened in Brazil. By the way, the Amazon still burning under Jair Bolsonaro. So, look, that's what these right wing governments do. They basically open up the country for exploitation by multinational corporations and end up making themselves very, very, very rich in the process, while endangering, obviously, the local community, especially the indigenous community, like we've seen in Brazil, and now the indigenous community, which is the majority of the country of Bolivia right now. So, unfortunately, that's what we're going to see, right? So now, what's interesting about this, right? And the whole thing is very interesting slash disastrous, but um, the timing is probably the most interesting for this, right? So obviously there was an election back in October, right? Well, the timing of this coup so soon after that election is interesting because what they wanted to do, I think, is to use that election as a springboard in order to overthrow basically the left wing government. Now, along with that timing is also what Morales planned to do later on in his fourth term, right? So now let me give you an example of that. Now, this coup happened just after Morales signaled that he wanted to cancel an agreement with a German company that would develop lithium deposits. Now, lithium is used to create batteries for electric cars, electric vehicles, right? So, lithium is a very important resource. In fact, lithium is expected to be highly in demand within the next few years. So, and look, as somebody who, you know, likes to push alternative energy, and I appreciate the fact that we're going to electric cars. I want an electric car. At the same time, we also have to look at, oh, look, here we're having a situation where now an entire country will be exploited so that we can all have cheaper electric cars. But hey, at least we're saving the environment, right? So it's like now there's an evil involved in trying to make ourselves a little bit more, or I should say, a little less dependent on fossil fuels. But it involves exploiting another country. So that's what we have. Okay. So now the Morales move, let me give you more details on that. On November 4th, to cancel the December 2018 agreement with Germany's ACI Systems Alemania came after weeks of protests from the residents of the Potosi area. Now, that particular area of Bolivia has about 50 to 70% of the world's lithium reserves. This is in an area called the Salar de Uyuni Salt Flats. Okay. So now, among other clients, the ACISA provides batteries to Tesla. Now, look, if you want to see what the result of this is, just go look at Tesla stock. Huge increase. And again, I'm conflicted because I actually do like what Tesla does as far as engineering cars. I have friends that work at Tesla. And so, look, I'm conflicted, but look, right? They need lithium. And so now we have this expectation that the lithium reserves will be exploited by these corporations. And so other corporations that rely on that, their stocks are going to go up. And like I said, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. So now, more. Uh, According to Bloomberg News, demand for lithium is expected to more than double by the year 2025. So, and right now, right now, lithium is mainly mined in Australia, Chile, and Argentina. But Bolivia has about 9 million tons. And to really give you an idea of how much that is relative to the rest of the world, Bolivia, and why there's such an interest in these lithium mines, they have the second largest amount of unmined lithium in the world. Yikes. So now what Morales wanted to do is pull out of that deal and either renegotiate or even nationalize the lithium mines. And so they can't have that happen. Now, let me give you more details on that. Back in June, Telesur reported that Morales' government was determined to industrialize Bolivia and has invested huge amounts to ensure that lithium is processed within the country to export it only in value-added form, such as in batteries. So, nationalize the lithium deposits, manufacture the batteries on their own, and then sell them to other companies, including Tesla. That, of course, will cost Tesla money, or these other companies that are also interested in this battery technology. And so they're like, no, cut out the middleman. We just want the lithium. Look, a disastrous situation, right? So now, of course, and not only that, but let me go back to that for a second. So if you do the manufacturing in Bolivia, well, that means jobs for Bolivians, right? And a better standard of living, higher wages, etc., right? Well, now, not going to happen. It would have actually lifted more Bolivians if it went properly, more Bolivians out of poverty, and increased the GDP of the country, and would have helped, like I said, everyone in that country, except for, of course, the multimillionaires. So now, not going to happen, right? What it looks like now is that you're going to have more multinational corporations that are going to have a go at mining the country's lithium and extracting the profit not for the Bolivian people, but for essentially themselves. Anyone who doesn't see that there's a profit motive behind the coup, look, you don't want to see it at this point. And look, a lot of people are also seeing the handiwork of the CIA involved. I mean, after all, it's not like they don't have a track record of overthrowing leftist governments in South America for the benefit of large multinational corporations. I mean, look, you know the term banana republic? That literally comes from a time when the U.S. instituted a coup in order to get access to cheap bananas. It's not like it hasn't happened before. Look, if we do it for something as simple as bananas, which is bananas, I know, wrong time. Why wouldn't we do it for something that is expected to have in the next few years incredible demand, as we see with the market for lithium? As usual, this seems to come down to money, to profit, and, for the U.S., basically, the U.S. government, corrupt as it is, paving the way for multinational corporations that buy our politicians and essentially have captured our government to exploit another South American country and their resources for their own gain. That's the situation, man. Sad as it is. All right. Moving on. One more story on Bolivia. Related to, I guess. There was a lot of stories that I could have went to in Bolivia. Maybe I'll space them out, but that's one of the big ones. So now let's go to American reaction on the left. Progressives are now calling out the bogus resignation of Bolivia's left-wing president, Evo Morales, and are correctly labeling it as a military coup. Morales was forced to resign on Sunday under threat from the nation's military, police forces, and right-wing protesters. Now, interesting story coming out about the police. Turns out police are now joining. There are lots of reports of police now joining the protests against the new right wing government. So that's interesting. So now going back to the protesters here, they were backed by Christian fundamentalists and neoliberals who want to basically roll back the nationalization of the country's natural resources, including oil, and to make sure that the country's lithium deposits are able to be accessed by multinational corporations. Now, Bolivia has the second largest concentration of lithium in the entire world. And lithium, of course, is a main component in battery technology used for electric cars. Now, in order to see the reaction to the news of these lithium deposits now likely going to be privatized, you only need to look at Tesla's stock prices. So now, his supposed resignation and exile, by the way, followed Morales' announcement that he would hold new elections after the U.S.-dominated Organization of American States, the OAS, had said that there was irregularities during the election that happened on October 20th. Now, Morales actually won by about 600,000 votes, which is a 10% margin over his more neoliberal / right-wing opponent. And yet, they said, oh no, we've got irregularities, right? So now what's interesting here is that election experts have disagreed. And besides, when you look at the OAS, they've long had an anti-leftist bias. In fact, they were created to combat communism in South America, which the Morales government wasn't exactly communist. So anyway, now prominent progressives have decided to release some statements on this. We'll start with, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, she stated simply on Twitter, quote, "What's happening right now in Bolivia isn't a democracy, it's a coup." That, of course, pushes back against the current narrative in the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, who have all pointed out all the negative things about Evo Morales and basically called him an authoritarian, a dictator, et cetera, et cetera. So taking that very right-wing narrative on Bolivia. Representative Ilhan Omar, also, she was the first one to speak out on Sunday of the squad. She said there's a word for the president of a country being pushed out by the military. It's called a coup. She said, we must unequivocally oppose political violence in Bolivia. Bolivians deserve free and fair elections. No, of course, there's a lot of people that are pushing back and saying, but they didn't have free and fair elections. No, that's not exactly true. Again, Morales won by about 600,000 votes, 10% over his opponent. And there was, contrary to the charges by mainstream corporate media and the U.S. government, there was no proof of election fraud. In fact, according to the Center for Economic and Policy Research, statistical analysis of election returns and tally sheets from Bolivia's October 20th election showed that there was no evidence of any kind of irregularities or fraud that affected the official results that gave Evo Morales a victory in the first round. So what we have is essentially a U.S.-backed illegal coup, just as we saw with Brazil, and just as we nearly saw with Venezuela. So now, Ilhan, AOC, and now Bernie weighed in. And by the way, Bernie Sanders is the only U.S. presidential candidate to make a statement so far on Bolivia. He said, I'm very concerned about what appears to be a coup, where the military, after weeks of political unrest, intervened to remove President Evo Morales. The U.S. must call for an end to violence and support Bolivia's democratic institutions. So, and right now, having a coup is not exactly a democratic institution. Now, this isn't the first time that Sanders and progressives actually spoke out about things happening in that part of the world. Now, Bernie Sanders, and he deserves a lot of credit for this, and he doesn't get it. Um, I should say he doesn't get that credit. Is that he was the only candidate to take the side of political prisoner and ex-leader of Brazil, Lula da Silva. Now, Lula was a very popular politician, just like Evo Morales. Um, he was arrested during another right-wing takeover by U.S.-backed opposition, Jair Bolsonaro. So, like I said, this happened in Brazil. So now Lula, if you guys can remember, he was arrested on phony corruption charges, uh, which again they didn't have any proof of. But you take the most popular person out of the race and put him in prison. So we can't obviously you can't run for election in prison. And then you get the populist right wing leader, and that's what happened with Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro, of course, has opened up the country to basically exploitation by large multinational corporations. And so now we have a situation where there's exploitation of Brazil. And not only that, but you have the Amazon that is also on fire. Thanks to, of course, Bolsonaro opening that up to logging, mining, etc. And so that's what happens. So, look, AOC, Omar, Sanders, what they've done is that they've showed a surprising level of leadership, at least compared to other politicians. Again, you have a lot of politicians from the right that are deeply supportive of these right wing leaders and of crushing left wing governments. Not a surprise, but you don't see a lot on the other side. You don't see a lot of Democrats defending these left wing leaders. Now, why is that? Well, because a lot of Democrats aren't really left wing. That's one of the big problems here with the left, or I should say, with the Democratic Party, is that they're not with the left. They are not the left. They're the establishment and actually tend to support those right wing leaders that are trying to usurp democracy in these South American countries. And so now, one thing, and one Democrat that I want to point out, who's good on a lot of issues, and I do like her, but Elizabeth Warren still hasn't made a statement about this. She never made a statement about Lula da Silva. She hasn't made a statement really about, she hasn't made one about Bolivia. And so, look, that's a red flag to me. I think that's something that worries a lot of progressives. And that goes to the belief that Warren isn't actually capable of really standing up for her positions. And again, that's something that progressives are, look, that's something that we worry about. We want someone who is willing to stand up and say and do the right thing that we can, count on to fight for us, even when it's not politically popular. And Bernie Sanders is the only politician that's running in the Democratic side that actually has that has been saying the same thing for 40 years, even when it was not popular, pushing for Medicare for all, pushing for gay rights back when it wasn't popular, pushing for, these policies, single payer, free college, etc., a higher minimum wage. Been fighting for these same things. It's been consistent. But also, like I said, I guess when it comes down to it, when you fight for something that isn't popular, that makes you a real leader instead of a follower. And look, for Medicare for all, I've had a lot of Johnny come latelys jump on and say that they support Medicare for all, or they support universal health care, they support Medicare for some but not all, or Medicare for all who want it. It's not real. And so we see these people. We see the people who jumped on to the name because it was popular. And we see the people who were there from the beginning, who have been fighting from the beginning. And we see that they were fighting when it wasn't popular. And the reason that it is popular now is because of them. And so That's what true leadership is. And so it translates into stuff like this as well. Speaking out for Palestinian rights when that's not a popular position these days and hasn't been a popular position. When the mainstream position of for example, the U.S. government is protect Israel at all costs, even if they do human rights abuses. By the way, speaking out against the Israeli abuses of the Palestinians will automatically get you a label of being anti-Semitic, which anti-Semitism does exist, and it exists in large part, especially for the right wing, who tend to scream anti-Semitism. But also, the Democrats tend to scream anti-Semitism at anyone who criticizes the beloved Israel. And so that's an issue. That's an issue. But also an issue that you can lead on by saying, hey, you know what? I do respect Palestinian rights. And I do believe that even though, what Hamas does is wrong, and even though I do respect, the fact that Israel is there and that, we care about the safety and security of people in Israel, these people who are in Palestine also have rights and they deserve to be treated like human beings. And I don't think that's a radical thing to say, but then again, there's a lot of people who would disagree with that statement. And so even calling that out and saying it is taking what is considered to be a bold radical stance. And again, that's what leadership looks like. So now, again, with Omar, AOC, and Sanders, we know, at least from what they've been saying, that they have the political courage to speak up. And that's really important going forward, not just for a Democratic primary, but when you're actually in power and can do something about it. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a break. We're going to get into some impeachment stuff. So that's always fun. And then, of course, we'll make fun of Scott Walker and his tree. All right. So stay right here. We'll be right back. Like and share the stream. Super chats. Shout out some patrons and some channel members right when we come after the break. So stay right here around the nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show. Around the nation right here, T. Whoops. Okay. Curse these fat fingers. All right. Anyway. Pressing buttons. All right. So we've got some fun comments here, but first, before we get to those, I want to give a shout out to some patrons here. So let me get to that real quick, as I was supposed to be doing during the break. All right. So let's here, and I want to give a shout out to, of course, Andrew Irwin, Andrew Walsh, Angela, and Anita Stovall. So thank you to those patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can support the show. Then we'll go and let's see. Thank some of the channel members. I want to give a shout out to Jeanette Villalona, Eddie B2001, and Wayne Borman. So thank you to those people who have joined the channel membership program. So it really, really helps us get the message out. All right. So now let's get some comments here. Member comments here, obviously. Star Trek says, truth is not popular and sometimes it's downright inconvenient, but necessary. We need that outspoken courage in 2020. I agree. 100%. Actus Magus says, Sanders is the only candidate that understands that we need a people-led movement to get policies like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal passed and implemented. Absolutely. And so that is something that Elizabeth Warren, I don't know if she doesn't understand that. I think maybe she thinks, oh no, technocratic approach. We don't, I'm going to go from like the top down and I'm going to convince my fellow Democrats and fellow Republicans that this is good policy. Oh, bless her naive heart. Not going to work. Not going to work in a system that is super, super corrupt. No, what it's going to take is people pressure. And it's going to take a mass movement. And the thing about this is that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren don't exactly have the same base, despite the fact that a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters would support Warren being on the ticket, myself included, or Warren being the second choice. And then, of course, there's another faction of Bernie Sanders supporters that say, no, Bernie Tulsi. All right, so that's a completely different thing. And like I said, there are the different supporters, right? Elizabeth Warren has your more establishment, comfortable, friendly, a little bit of change here supporters, right? Not exactly the Joe Biden supporters, right? But she does get wealthy white people, and a lot of them. And so these are the people that aren't exactly comfortable with the revolution, but they do kind of understand that, okay, we need a little bit of change. What Trump did on the taxes, not so good. Yeah, well, tax wouldn't be too bad of an idea, but let's not shake up the system too much, right? And so that's the difference that I see. Bernie Sanders understands that you need a mass movement, whereas Elizabeth Warren doesn't. And I think the fact that she doesn't is what is attracting a lot of the former Hillary people to her campaign. And the fact that Joe Biden is a doddering moron at this point. And I say that affectionately because, look, I love the memes about Uncle Joe. But when you look into his record, not so good. Not so good at all. And then, of course, Pete Buttigieg, empty suit. And so that's what you have right now in the top four. Empty suit Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden. And, of course, Bernie Sanders. And look, in Iowa, not good. Pete Buttigieg, number one. Disaster. So anyway, one more here. And this is from Jeff James, a resident German. His question is, why did the Bolivian government want to work with a small German company? Well, they wanted to use new methods to extract the lithium, less harmful to the environment than existing mines. Look, I'm not sure why the Bolivian government under Morales said, okay, we're gonna pull out of that deal with the German company. Could it be that they wanted to use that as leverage in order to get, I guess, a better terms for the Bolivian people? I could see that happening. Or, like I said, maybe they thought that they could do it better. I'm not exactly sure. Um, I guess we would have to ask the Bolivian government or the ex-Bolivian president in that case. And I don't think we'll be able to do that, at least not on this show. Would be nice though. All right, so that is a good question though, and that's a fair question, Job. And so thank you for asking that. All right. Anyway, so let's dive in. We got some impeachment stuff to get through, so let's do it. Okay. Now, on Wednesday, the House will begin impeachment hearings, which will be public, and that has the president apparently somewhat agitated, as you'll see from some of the following disastrous tweets. First, let's go to this one. Earlier today, Trump asked, "Why is such a focus put on the second and third hand witnesses, many of whom are never Trumpers or whose lawyers are never Trumpers, when all you have to do is read the phone call transcript with the Ukrainian president and see firsthand?" Now, look, I love how one of the defenses read the transcript. Well, I would love to read the transcript. It's too bad you have it locked away in a secure server. Sure, I would love to read the transcript. Besides, here's the thing. It's actually not us focusing on those so-called second-hand and third-hand witnesses, which, by the way, they're not all second and third-hand. Colonel Vindman was literally listening to the call when it happened, and he testified. So, and he's on he was on the Security Council, and so, okay, but let's just continue. He and others have stated that there was no pressure put on him to investigate Sleepy Joe Biden. I'm sorry. Let's go back to that first tweet here to reference what he's talking about, and he's basically saying Zelensky. He said he and others, the Ukrainian president, stated that there was no pressure put on him to investigate Sleepy Joe Biden, even though as president, I have an obligation, and by the way, that's written in quotation marks, and why is that written in quotation marks? I have no idea. To look into corruption and Biden's actions on tape about firing the prosecutor. Now, the prosecutor is referencing, by the way, Biden did help push out a prosecutor, but that prosecutor was not going after corruption. That was the whole purpose of Biden pushing them out, is because they wouldn't actually go after corruption. And his sons taking millions of dollars. As far as I know, it was just the one. It was Hunter Biden, with no knowledge or talent from a Ukrainian energy company. Okay, that's fair. And more millions taken from China. What? And now reports of other companies and countries also giving him big money are certainly looking very corrupt, to put it mildly, to me. Both Biden should be forced to testify in this no due process scam. Wow. So obviously there's more, right? So here's the thing. That's no more inherent corruption as putting Ivanka and Jared Kushner in the cabinet, despite not knowing anything about their respective positions. Advisors of the president. What are they advising the president on? Didn't they know anything about politics? Are they there for a reason? What are they there for? I don't know. Nobody knows. It's the same reason. Like, what was Hunter Biden doing on the Ukrainian gas board? Nobody knows, but he's getting paid a lot of money to do so. And Jared and Ivanka Trump, while they're not getting paid to be advisors to the president, they are getting access to world leaders, for example, the Chinese government, in order to get patents. And of course, Kushner has been, I guess, the point man on working with Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. By the way, Trump has an interesting relationship with the Saudis. Turns out they really love to buy real estate from Donald Trump, buy rooms in Trump Tower. That's very interesting. For actually large sums of money, more than their market value. That's also very interesting. But okay, anyway. This entire argument, by the way, of Biden's are corrupt is basically that meme of Spider-Man pointing at a copy of himself. Look, it's basically, yes, they're all corrupt. There we go. Hunter Biden got paid for being a Biden. We know this. And right now, the Trump family is, of course, benefiting massively off of politics. We know this. So, he's calling a spade a spade. That's what's going on here. But I want to get back to the second and third hand witnesses because that's, like I said, fun. Speaking of witnesses, you have Gordon Sondland. Now, Gordon Sondland testified. Gordon Sondland is also a giant Trump supporter. He gave the Trump campaign millions of dollars and in return got appointed to the ambassador to the EU. Well, wonderful for him, right? So now Sondland had reversed his testimony and said there was, quote unquote, quid pro quo, which, by the way, I actually hate that phrase. And I've been using it a lot, and I definitely shouldn't, because a more accurate description here is extortion. So now Sondland not only revised his testimony after giving his original testimony that said, oh no, Donald Trump did nothing wrong. No, he revised it to say, yes, there was explicit extortion. And yes, I had been a messenger for Donald Trump. He basically told me to say the things that I said. It's all him. Well, there you go. Now, it's not just him. It's also Lev Parnas. By the way, Lev Parnas. Parnas was arrested for creating a shell company in order to give around somewhere 300,000 to 325,000 to Donald Trump's election campaign. Parnas is willing to testify that he was given orders by Giuliani to put pressure on Vladimir Zelensky in order to get investigation into the Bidens. And by the way, it had to be publicly announced before Trump would let the national security money go. So what's this about never Trumpers? Really? and by the way, here's the thing. That money, he had no basis to hold that up. That money already had to go because it was passed by Congress. Congress literally said, you've got to let that money go. You cannot hold it up. Oh, but Jeff, you don't understand. He's got an obligation to look into corruption, right? Or I should say an obligation to look into corruption. No, this isn't investigating corruption. This is asking for a personal favor and tying military aid to that favor. It is extortion, it is bribery. And the thing is, here's the thing. Let's talk about due process for a second. Impeachment is not a criminal process. Impeachment is a political process. So when Trump asks for due process, it makes me think a couple of different things. One is either he's too dumb to realize that what he's doing, or I guess the second thing is he knows he's criminal and he's too dumb to realize what he's talking about. I will go for option 2. But so that is Donald Trump getting very, very nervous about these upcoming public impeachment hearings. Can't wait to see him live tweet that one. All right. More. All right. Now, Republicans just released a set of talking points on Ukraine, and already they've essentially been destroyed. According to Bloomberg, the talking points were distributed by Republican staffers on the House Intelligence Committee, and they are as follows. And let's see if we can easily defeat these ridiculous talking points. The July 25th summary of the call between Trump and Ukraine President Zelensky shows no conditionality or evidence of pressure. I want you to do me a favor. I need you to do me a favor. The United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. Those are things in the official memo, probably in the transcript, if we were allowed to see it, if it were not locked up in a secret server. More. Both Zelensky and Trump have said there is no pressure on the call. Okay, we'll get to that one, right? The Ukraine government was not aware and a hold of U.S. security assistance by the time of the July 25th call. That's a maybe, right? Trump met with Zelensky, although not in the Oval Office, and U.S. security assistance flowed to Ukraine in September of 2019, both of which occurred without Ukraine investigating Trump's political rivals. So there are the talking points. Now, here's the thing. I think they're crap. Again, in the memo, Trump asked for a favor that was contingent on two things. Number one, finding the CrowdStrike server. That CrowdStrike server, by the way, that feeds into a conspiracy theory, and Donald Trump, he loves his conspiracies, that would prove that it was somehow not the Russians that tried to interfere in the 2016 election, but the Ukrainians, and probably on behalf of the Democrats, which would, of course, get that whole nasty Mueller thing off his record. And so we could say, the Mueller thing, total witch hunt, total sham. I should get 2 extra years in my presidency. He has actually said that before, too. So I'm just saying. Now, Burisma is the second thing. And, of course, involved with that, Hunter Biden getting $50,000 a month and Joe Biden pushing out a prosecutor. Now, by the way, that prosecutor that was pushed out by not just Joe Biden, but a lot of people, that's the international position at the time, they pushed out that prosecutor because he refused to investigate corruption in Ukraine. The very thing that Trump seems to be, very concerned about. Now, we also know from testimony that the foreign aid was conditional to Zelensky announcing an investigation into those two things. Now, the thing is that the president couldn't really hold that up for that long. That money was already passed through Congress and should have went to Ukraine immediately. So now, that money, like I said, conditional into the investigations. Those investigations would have helped Donald Trump personally. It really wouldn't have been fighting actual corruption, and it wouldn't have been pushing U.S. national security interests in the area. In fact, the money that was supposed to go to Ukraine, that eventually did, that was for U.S. purposes to, defend against more Russian incursions into Ukraine. So now, clear extortion, right? So the fact that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, said, "Oh, no pressure at all, no pressure at all." Well, it's funny because when you go back to the memo, he kept stating, "Oh, by the way, I stayed at Trump Tower, and I really appreciated what you were saying. I really appreciate your campaign." He had his lips firmly planted on Trump's ass. You don't do that unless Trump has something that you want or need very, very badly. And what Zelensky needed was to Russia not come and F up his shit. I'm just saying that's probably what would happen without the U.S. security assistance, because they already did that. And so in Crimea, so that's okay. Moving on, right? So now Zelensky says, no pressure, because again, if you go against Donald Trump, you might not actually get that security assistance. And so it's like, I got to work with this guy. Not only that, even if that's not true, okay, well, what about at home? What about facing your own voters? What about facing your own fellow government officials, right? Who knew that you could be bullied by Donald Trump into doing basically his bidding in order to get that money? How weak will you look if you're a leader that admits that? How weak, right? And so you don't want to admit it. You don't want to say, "Oh, no, totally bowed to pressure." No, you're going to say, "No pressure at all. What are you talking about? I was doing this for the best of the country." Right. So, no, he's not going to admit it now. Now, as for Ukraine not knowing about the aid being frozen by the time of that call, again, that's a maybe, because we're not exactly sure when they knew, and it's really hard to find out. That said, recent testimony from Laura Cooper, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, did testify that Ukraine did actually know about the freeze by at least early August. And so that leaves a window of about a couple of weeks where we're not sure if they actually knew about the freeze by the time of that call or not. So, and yes, Trump did eventually meet with Zelensky. They eventually did release that military aid. But here's the thing, right? The White House released that aid after members of Congress were up in arms about it. And so they were really, really upset about this. In fact, according to the New York Times, only at the last minute, after key members of Congress erupted in protest after over Mr. Trump's actions, which basically took the power out of Congress's hands, which did pass that aid package and put it into Trump's hands. And of course, they don't exactly like it when you take away the power for them to do their job. Congress doesn't. Who knew, right? And so the White House did release that aid without a public investigation. So those are the talking points. And I think I actually did a pretty good job at debunking those. But in reality, you're either going to believe me or not. And it depends greatly on whether or not you believe the facts over what Donald Trump and the Republican Party say. And look, I don't know about you, but I don't trust Donald Trump. I'm pretty sure most of you watching don't. And I'm sure some of you watching who are probably hate watching right now probably do trust him. And so don't believe any word that I say. And I get it. And I trust that the Democrats that are working, that are looking into this, they're not buying these talking points, and they don't trust Donald Trump. But again, the thing is true on the other side as well. Republican voters, at least the 62% of them that will back Trump no matter what, they either don't believe this or they don't care, even if they believe that it is true. And for those people, it's a cult mentality. And so these talking points won't convince anybody who doesn't already believe them. But the reverse is true. The facts will also not convince Trump voters. And that's the important thing. Because the overall thing on this impeachment inquiry and impeachment itself is the numbers game. And this is going to factor into the number game that Republicans are playing right now. And by Republicans, I specifically mean Republican members of the Senate. We already know that the Senate Republicans, there's a lot of them that don't like Donald Trump. 35 of them admitted that they would vote, if it were secret, to remove President Trump. Now, that's over half of the Republicans in the Senate. That's a large, I believe there's only 52 Republicans in the Senate have a small majority, right? 35 of them say, yeah, we would impeach and remove. Okay. But see, here's the thing. The reason that they don't do that, or they need a secret ballot, is because they are afraid of the voters. So, like craven politicians they are doing political calculations to see what the best course is for them to be able to keep their jobs and their positions. And see, these Republicans, they have no spine, no core, and no value because, as usual, they are craven politicians who serve an increasingly rabid, fact-free, cultish base. And I don't feel bad for them. Okay. All right. Look, I promised Scott Walker, so let's just get it out of the way. I'm like massively over time. All right. It's November, which means the war on Christmas is officially underway. Or you could say the first shots have been fired in the war on Christmas. Either way. So now the freakout involves a new science-themed holiday tree put up in Wisconsin by Democratic Governor Tony Evers. So now this has a lot of Republicans triggered online, which is always fun. But for the uninitiated, let me just kind of spell this out. You might be thinking, wait, war on Christmas? What's a war on Christmas? Holiday, Christmas tree. Wait, who cares? What's going on? What's the problem? Well, look, for some time, it's kind of now a tradition in politics, right? For years, Republican politicians and pundits have claimed that there is a war on Christmas engaged in and waged by the secularists. who are trying to take the reason for the season out, eliminate Jesus from Christmas. Which, by the way, Jesus hasn't exactly been involved in Christmas for quite some time, at least for, you know, all the companies that are making millions of dollars, billions of dollars off Christmas sales. And look, Christmas, there are even people in other religions that celebrate versions of Christmas. So it's ridiculous. But anyway, I'm a secular person. So I'm one of the secularists apparently waging the war on Christmas. And I actually don't give a crap if somebody says Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. I don't care. If somebody says Merry Christmas, I'll say either Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. Doesn't matter. This isn't like a giant war for me, right? And I don't get triggered when somebody hands me a Merry Christmas cup or I get wrapping paper with Merry Christmas on it. I'm not freaking out here, right? And look, I'm like most people, right? Most people don't actually care about this, but there is a subsection of the American public on the right wing that seems to want to play the oppression Olympics about this time of year. And the most famous example of this is former Fox News host Bill O'Reilly, who used to do this segment every year, basically getting angry when somebody doesn't say Merry Christmas or puts up a holiday tree or Starbucks cup containing the words Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. And of course, following him, you had this Joshua Feuerstein who would write Merry Christmas on his Starbucks cups, or, you know, say his name is Merry Christmas so that they would actually write it in the cup and have to yell out Merry Christmas. And somehow that was a sick burn to all the secularists. Ridiculous, right? And this, again, further trickled into even Donald Trump's campaign, who for some reason says after he got elected, we can say Merry Christmas again. Well, who said we couldn't before? Doesn't make any sense, right? But hey, that's what it is. So now, getting back to Wisconsin, right? So Wisconsin has a Democratic governor. Before, they had Governor Scott Walker. Now, back in 2011, Scott Walker played along with this war on Christmas theme and decided to change a quarter-century tradition by basically renaming the holiday tree to a Christmas tree. Because, like I said, war on Christmas, right? The elves' lives were in danger, and we had to do something about it. Okay, now the Associated... Yeah, I know. Jeff Sessions is very thankful, by the way, for the intervention. Speaking of elves. But anyway, the Associated Press reported that Evers changed it back. But he didn't just do that. Again, shots fired, right? He also gave the Christmas tree, or no, sorry, holiday tree, a science theme. Because nothing pisses off creationists and extreme Christians, right? Then not only not saying that it's a Christmas tree, but saying it's a science-themed Christmas tree, than actually having science. Hilarious. In fact, Evers said this: "We want students to make holiday ornaments that celebrate what science means to them, their families, and their communities." Now, there's a reason Evers did this, and it's not because he hates Christmas and Jesus, etc. It's because he's a science teacher, or he was before he became governor. So, okay. Now, that's when, of course, conservatives flipped out. First, you had Wisconsin Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald calling this, quote, PC garbage. Well, hey, look, if part of that tree involves hanging up motherboards and mice, mice pointers, not actual mice, come on, and stuff like that, then you could say it's technically PC garbage. But in reality, we know what he's talking about. Again, ridiculous, because they're saying, what does science mean to you and your community? Hey, that's kind of interesting and innovative, and also helps people learn, right? But of course, Scott Fitzgerald, you don't want that. No. He also, this is Assembly Speaker Robin Voss tweeted this out, quote, "We all know it's a Christmas tree, no matter what Governor Evers calls it." Traitor. Weak. Okay, anyway. Sad. Then you have Scott Walker. Now, Scott Walker said this, and he tweeted a picture of a Christmas tree or a holiday tree, whatever, right? He said, "This is a Christmas tree that is used by people celebrating Christmas. This is not a holiday tree." Sad. Scott Walker then said, "Type this word in your iPhone and look what emoji comes up. Christmas." And it's got a little tree next to it. Got you, libs. Owned. No, this is funny because this is coming from a party that regularly calls people snowflakes. I mean, who's the snowflake here? Who's literally melting down over a tree? This was an elected politician. Somebody voted for this guy. Really? And by the way, Scott Walker, is Scott Walker saying that Christmas is not a holiday? Again, you say happy holidays, right? To not just include Christmas, but include Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or Saturnalia, or whatever holiday you want to lump into it. Hell, you could even lump in Thanksgiving, as people tend to do, right? Around this time, people start saying happy holidays. Well, holidays, right? Are you saying Christmas isn't a holiday by getting mad at saying happy holidays? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. But okay. So look, again, technically this would be a holiday tree since it's a holiday. But look, here's the thing too. Trees are not solely Christmas. In fact, Christianity took tree decoration from Roman pagans. And they're like, hey, that's a really good idea. We like that. Okay, well, we're going to take it. Okay, well, that's what happened. And it really got actually more mainstreamed back in Germany. So credit to the Germans on that one. But still, like I said, you have these conservatives who use the holiday tree as some sort of proof that Christianity is being attacked and marginalized in America, which is both sad and absurd. And would be actually hilarious if it weren't so sad and absurd. So now, I'm going to get to some tweets here. Just some reaction to Scott Walker's freak out. And this is Asha Ranjapa, who said, Colonel Scott. This is funny because this is letters from the war on Christmas. This is one of those. Colonel Scott, I know well the horrors you must endure at the front lines of this dreadful war. Your early Christmas tree has ambushed the holiday rebels, and they are angry, very angry. The elves must not see you lose hope. Stay brave. Pixelated Boat said this. Scott, I sell trees for a living. You screwed up and bought the wrong one. That's a holiday tree. Hank Green says, I have so many questions. Number one, has somebody been bullying Scott Walker into calling his Christmas tree a holiday tree? It wasn't me. I didn't do it. Anybody? You better stop that. Scott Walker will melt down. He will cry if you continue to bully him into calling it a holiday tree. And then finally, no, not finally. Number two, does Scott Walker's tree grow up 20 days before Thanksgiving? Hey, look, I've said it before, not on the show, but Christmas needs to lay off until Thanksgiving is done. That's my personal opinion. Like, don't start with that Christmas stuff until Thanksgiving is over with. And I'm sure a lot of you might agree with me. And then three, what kind of monster wraps every present with the exact same minimalist wrapping paper? He's got a picture of just that. That's great. Rob Anderson from Louisiana says this. Man, I remember when politicians had loftier goals than to defend against imaginary assaults. Please defend us from the candy corn wars. The struggle is real. Yeah, candy corn. Hey, look, I'm pro candy corn, so don't at me. All right. And finally, Heather Hewson says, oh, is it war and Christmas season again? Already? It seems to start earlier every year. Again, a shot at that. A shot across the bow. Christmas. Stay in your lane, Christmas. Stay in your lane. You have to have Halloween, Thanksgiving, then Christmas. Own lane. Own lane. So, there you have it. War on Christmas, shots fired, and it's all beginning in Wisconsin. All right. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Going a little bit late. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Like and share the videos as well. Subscribe to the channel. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, or become a channel member. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.